that always happens. I end up forgetting to hit record. If you're so inclined, we'd love to see your faces. So feel free to turn on your video. If you can, at least just here initially. It's really nice to see everybody. Awesome, this is so fun. Okay, welcome everybody to Great Old Broadsford Wilderness's Boundary Waters Advocacy Night. We're really glad to have you here and have you join us. My name is Katya Speaker. I'm one of the Broads' grassroots regional coordinators, which means I have the pleasure of working with some of the most amazing advocates across the country, and those are our volunteer chapter leaders. So I know we have a few of you who may not be quite as familiar with Broads. So just for those of you who are new to Broads, we are a national grassroots organization led by women that engages and inspires activism to preserve and protect wilderness and wildlands. And one of the main ways we do that is by supporting roughly 40 volunteer-led chapters in about 17 states. We might have more states than that now. And many of those members are also master commenters, just like you will be after tonight's advocacy night. So thank you for joining us. We'll have a few presentations tonight, and after which you will have the opportunity to start writing your own personal comment to advocate for boundary waters protection, which is really important. So this is a webinar, but it is also an opportunity for you to take action, and we encourage you to do so. So if you need to go grab some pen and paper, please feel free at any point in time. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and briefly introduce our guests. And in case you hear that, I do have a little mischievous kitten over here. If you can hear her making noise, welcome to my house. I'm going to introduce Lauren Baratich. She is Broad's Advocacy or Associate Director, and as well as Sam Chadwick, who's also Associate Director of Save the Boundary Waters, and Amy Freeman, author, explorer, advocate extraordinaire, as well as two of our co-leaders of the Minnesota Wild Waters Broadband chapter in Minnesota there. Okay, without any more talking from me, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Lauren to kick us off.
Great. I'm not on mute. Okay. First thing with Zoom bingo, and I'm doing great so far. Okay, so I'm not on mute. Thank you so much for the introduction, Katya, and for introducing Broads. Thank you everyone for joining us on this call. As you know, we have some awesome presenters this evening and an opportunity to collectively have our voices heard to protect a wild treasured place. These advocacy nights are so important. And so I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of the change, especially in the last few years that we've really been playing a lot of defense. We have an incredible opportunity right now to play some offense in our advocacy work, and you as our collective voice can really make that happen. So thanks for joining us this evening. As Katya said, my name is Lauren Baratich. I'm the Associate Director of Great Old Broadsford Wilderness. I have been with the organization, completing my 7th year, first as the Grassroots Leadership Program Director and now as the Associate Director. My background is in grassroots organizing, education, advocacy, and public land conservation policy, and it is an honor to work with such a passionate community of advocates and movers and shakers. As Associate Director, a favorite part of my job is working with our team to manage some of our advocacy efforts. And a major contribution to these efforts are events that we host called Broad Walks and Broadworks. These are multi-day, hands-on, experiential events that are outdoors, campouts, and we really create a foundation through experiential learning and place-based education. We host these events nationally or through our national office annually to gain attention and bring attention to areas of great concern and of critical importance. One of my most favorite and first exposures to a broad walk was a lucky invite I got when I first started in 2015 to attend our Boundary Waters broad walk. To start out and explain a little bit more about Broad's really dedicated and passionate participation with this campaign, I made a short little video to provide some context and to share some fun videos with you. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Bear with me here for 1 second. It's always such a thing. Okay, is it on pause? Okay, great. And then I'm going to stop my video for a moment. Can everyone see that screen, the two screen?
No, can't see it, Lauren.
Oh, I
Want to try again?
Yeah, let's try again. I wonder what happened. Okay.
There we go. Now we can see your desktop.
Okay, and then you should be able to see this black screen now.
There we go.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for bearing with us. Here we go. So our broad walks are fun, engaging, educational, and very empowering advocacy events. They are adventures for all, from beginners to experienced, outdoorsy, and nature-loving folks. Here you see the brains behind this 2015 advocacy event, our retired associate director, Rose Chilcote, who I followed around like a duckling to absorb her passion and knowledge for public lands campaigns and policy. So why is this so important? Well, you'll hear about this in great detail shortly, but here are the cliff notes. This area is known for its natural beauty. The Boundary Waters Canoe area wilderness is the most visited area in the National Wilderness System. The Boundary Waters have been under threat for almost a decade from proposed sulfide or copper mining on nearby lands. This wild freshwater landscape includes nearly 2,000 lakes ranging in size from 10,000 acres to 10 acres and more than 1,200 miles of canoe routes. This pristine wilderness area has been gravely threatened by acid mine drainage from development proposals like Twin Metals mines. Bronze knew this campaign was a top priority for us, and it was certainly important for our local emerging Minnesota Wild Water Broadband chapter. These members of our Broads community are our eyes and ears of our local and regional work. Protecting this area met all of our organizational and conservation objectives, and we loved it because it had strong political legs for the movement. The threat to this wilderness area went beyond just preserving wild lands, but also the local recreation economy, drinking water, and wildlife habitat. But we knew, however, that it also had solvability through congressional action and was attainable if we organized and partnered up. So we contacted our local movers and shakers, and they're on this call tonight. We hosted Forest Service Supervisor Brenda Halter and volunteered in stewardship projects, met with business owners, and went on a lot of hikes as well. Broads are passionate about change making, and to do so, we need to steward our change making desires and passions. We know how transformative it can be to visit a place, touch it, smell it, see it, to be a part of it, to feel that deep connection to it and grow the need to protect it. We hike, we play, and as you can see here, we have a lot of fun. And of course, we do not do this work alone. So thank you for being on this call. Thanks to our partners. We are all a part of this change together. All right. So that being said, Broads has been really dedicated to partnering with local, regional, and national organizations to be a part of change on the ground, all the way to influencing federal policy. Since this broad walk, and as some of those pictures showed, we've been working with partners like Save the Boundary Waters to continue to fight for its permanent protection. We've been hosting letter writing events, showing up at public hearings. We've hosted call-in days of action. We've taken our locals to DC and lobbied, and we've published numerous action alerts. We're definitely here for the long haul, and I'm just really excited about the faces that are on this call, because I'm seeing that we're not just Minnesota based here. This is a national campaign, and we have a lot of work to do to continue to raise awareness on how we can all collectively come together to create change around this. I was very careful about how far I went into detail on the campaign, because we have experts on the call to do that for us. So I will just end by thanking you again for joining us this evening. Continue to encourage you to not only join your local chapter, but continue to support us nationally, and continue to fight the good fight. We're in this together, and we really have the opportunity to see real change happen. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. And I did put it in the chat, but I'll go ahead and say it too. Feel free to type in the chat where you're from. We'd love to hear where you're joining us from. And I'm gonna hand it over to Sam. Where is she? Are you on there, Sam? Actually, no, wait, I'm not gonna hand it over to Sam. Hang on just a second. Gotta follow my own agenda here. Jeez, Katya. All right, first I'm gonna spend some time talking to two of our broadband leaders, Mo Monroe and Jan Bordone from the Minnesota Wild Waters Broadband, which started in about 2015, about the same time that we had the Broad Walk there in Minnesota. And Jan and Mo, are you there? I want to make sure you're there and ready to go. Yep.
We are there.
All right, awesome. Hello.
Hello to everybody, and thank you all for joining us tonight.
These two are playing snowbirds from Arizona tonight, but their hearts are really in the Boundary Waters, we promise. So I wanted to just ask some questions of you two. And the first one is just, you guys have had so much experiences in the Boundary Waters well before 2015 when you started the broadband chapter there. So what is it that you love most about Boundary Waters?
Well, I'll start. Yeah, and then Jan can join in. I think for me, in addition to, of course, the beautiful pristine waters and the amazing campsites and the sunsets, I really enjoy for many years unique trips. I would plan the trip and change it up every year. And there are of course, many countless waterways and portages that you can choose from to navigate through this national treasure. That was really fun for me, that piece of it, planning a different route each time, until I found the perfect campsite, and then of course wanted to go back to that site every year and base camp. Jan, how about you?
One of the things that I love about the Boundary Waters is, and have always been impressed about it, is how huge it is. It is one of the largest primitive wildernesses I've ever visited. It's, as we had heard from Lauren, it's 1.1 million acres, 1,200 miles of canoe trails. And I think back of all the trips that I've taken and all the canoeing that we've done, that's just a tiny dent in the 1,200 miles of canoeing that's possible. There's 12 major hiking trails, including the North Country, which is absolutely gorgeous. And the entire area extends 200 miles along the Canadian border. And it's unbelievably quiet. And it's so spiritual and sensitive that when you're there, you cannot resist being touched. It just touches your heart and your soul. The other thing that's so cool about it is in 2020, we have been declared a dark sky sanctuary, and we're one of 13 in the entire country or the world. So that's a real honor. So if you sit out at night, like many people have said, unbelievable stars, very pitch black, and sometimes you get the northern lights, which is a real gift.
Wow, yeah, one of 13. That's amazing. It's hard for me to imagine being in a place with absolutely no artificial light like that. In fact, I'm not even sure I've been to that dark of a place before. Thanks for sharing that. So, with that inspiring note on what you all love about the Boundary Waters so much, what efforts has your broadband taken to help protect it? What have you been doing there?
Okay, we partner with several organizations, Save the Boundary Waters, Friends of the Boundary Waters, and the Minnesota Volunteer Connection. The reason we did that is our mission is the same. It's the pristine water mission of all the groups. And we felt that by partnering, we would do better because we're bigger and we're more cooperative and we can do more. So part of that whole thing is we work very closely with the Minnesota Volunteer Connection, and they've helped us adopt an entry trail or point. So, and they've also helped us set up our stewardship projects. The Minnesota Volunteer Connection is kind of the direct vehicle for our coordination with the U.S. Superior National Forest Service, and they're responsible for the entire million-acre region. They provide all of the logistics around getting our entry permits and helping us with equipment and lining up the U.S. Forest Service to know where our small group impact would be the greatest. So 2 of our trails that were in our 3rd or 4th year out of the Gunflint Lake is not Gunflint, but Bearskin Lake is the Duncan Lake Trail and Daniels. Those 2 are directly out of that feeder lake. So we've cleaned them for 3 years. And in the process, we've developed a great relationship with our YMCA, Minneapolis YMCA program. So we use Camp Minogen, which is located off the Gunflint Trail, to do our base camp. And this year we went to Camp Widgewagon in the Ely area to do another trail that was not a connector trail, but it was called the Hobo Trail. It's a brand new trail. So we also strongly encourage our members and anybody that they know or anybody that we talk to, and Mo and I are always asked to go and speak to different groups. So recently we just spoke to a group in Egan that had over 100 women attend. And of course that was just excellent for us because we really encouraged them to participate with us and to become part of our organization and to also access the Boundary Waters when they can. One of the outfitters that we are strongly recommending is Women's Wilderness Discovery out of Ely. And they've been just excellent in trying to host different groups to go in. And then I'm just thankful to Lauren and to Rose for our National Broad Walk in 2015, because that's the catalyst that really helped me get in more involved with leadership and get the state chapter started.
Nice, thanks, Jan. I love how many partnerships you have there, and that's really a main staple of a lot of our chapters across the country is creating those partnerships to amplify our impact. So here we are today. We are, the point is to advocate and write comments to help protect the Boundary Waters. So why have you committed to working on and in advocating for the Boundary Waters?
Well, I'll start with this one. We're trying to do our part to educate our broads to the urgency of this matter so that they in turn educate others. Many of our broads have been to the BWCA in their past, and of course they cherish it, its specialness, as we do. If you've spent any time in the BWCA, then you want America's most visited wilderness area to be protected and not compromised by pollutants from this type of mining, pollution that would affect the pristine waters for hundreds of years in the future. Our broads have attended Water Action Day at the state capitol. They've handed out information brochures at the state fair so that people know what's going on. They've been in contact with our local, state, and federal elected officials, and now we are sharing our comments with the BLM and the Minnesota DNR. Jan?
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention about our Broad Walk in 2015 was I wish we could take every person in our country and have them go in where we did on the Kwishari River to see where they're drilling and experience what that can do, how much damage is going to occur. It just, it's scary. It just was unbelievable. One of our other leaders in our group, Valerie Dowell, is our advocacy leader, and she's been active with the Broads to write letters in support of protection of the boundary waters, and she alerts our group on many of the matters pertaining to advocacy. Louise Morgan is another one of our helpers who has been tremendously helpful. She's a good friend to Becky Rom, who we had at our stewardship project this last summer or September. And Becky just gave a rousing presentation. She is the original Northeastern Minnesota for Wilderness campaign manager, and of course works with Save the Boundary Waters. So we're very, very happy that she came, and through her presentation, we were able to really dynamite a group of very active people on our advocacy group. So the other thing is that I want to thank Mo, because she has been my #1 chum in terms of a co-director, and her skills in terms of all this technology are unbelievable. And I'm thankful because a leader can't do it alone, not when you're into this major kind of events, and you need the help of very dedicated women. And I thank those women that are helping me move this whole group forward.
Can I just ask really quickly? I see some familiar faces out
Yep.
there.
Yay.
Could the Minnesota Broads that are joining us tonight, could you guys wave to us right now?
Yay.
See those hands. Right,
I love it. I love it.
guys.
So good to see all of you on here. Thanks, Mo and Jan, for sharing your experiences with us. We are so appreciative of you and all the work you've done in that area. It's really, really inspiring, as a lot of our broadband chapter leaders are. So great to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now I'm finally going to hand it over to Sam Chadwick.
Woo. I'm so happy to be here. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, Zoom. And Katya can work on putting my slides up, but I'll first say thank you so much for inviting Amy and I here to be your special guests. So, some wannabe broads, I guess we are. And I was there with Lauren and some of you and your 2015 Broad Walk and worked with Rose. Doesn't seem like that long ago, but a lot has happened since then. So thank you. Well, I'm going to talk just so briefly about what the Boundary Waters is, because you already covered that a little bit, and Amy is also going to give us more appreciation for what an amazing place this is. I'll tell you a little bit about the history of what the campaign to save the Boundary Waters is and how we're going to protect the wilderness, and then spend a bit of time telling you about these public comment periods that are happening right now and how you can write your own really important comments and help spread the word. But if you go to the next slide, that is me and some pictures of the Broadwalk. There we are in the old cabin on the Kawishbi River campground where we had our gatherings and out on a hike. I'm as you heard, I'm the associate director at Save the Boundary Waters. I've been the deputy campaign manager since I started working here in 2014. I have a background in grassroots political advocacy before joining Save the Boundary Waters. And I studied botany and biology, actually. But after doing science and field research, which I loved in some ways, I decided I wanted to be more involved in political policy advocacy. So that's why I started doing grassroots work on social justice and environmental issues. I first went to the Boundary Waters, I believe, when I was 10 years old, with a church group at the time, and many of my trips were with church groups. I think the biggest impact on me that I can remember is learning to carry a canoe. I was a pretty scrawny little kid, but I was strong. And so being able to learn how to actually carry a canoe on my shoulders over these portages was so empowering. And I always wanted to carry the canoe instead of the packs because it was just more impressive, I suppose. So I definitely have that memory. And I remember as a kid never wanting to leave. Like, I wanted to stay in the wilderness. I don't want to go to the real world. I kind of resented having to go back to civilization. I'm a little bit more anxious person now. And so I find comfort in leaving sometimes when there's storms raging and you can get in some tricky situations out there. But that really makes me appreciate the power of the wilderness. It's like, I'm not in charge when you're in the middle of a big lake in a storm. That's Mother Nature. I have 3 little kids, 9, 5, and 2. They've all been to the Boundary Waters a couple times, and it's amazing to watch them play there. That's part of why I want to do this work. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me. And now the next slide, a little bit more about the Boundary Waters. You knew some of this already, so I'll try not to do too much repetition. You mentioned our dark sky designation. We also have a quiet place designation. There are not very many places in the world where you can measure, what natural or man-made sound there are. And the Boundary Waters, you can record, there's no man-made sounds, even like low-level rumbling that you would get in many places. So that's another kind of official designation. It is some of the cleanest water in the world. Many people drink straight out of the lake when they're there without filtering the water. Of course, many people choose to filter, and that's the official recommendation. But, there's no industry here to pollute it. And our Minnesota Department of Natural Resources calls the water immaculate. And part of the wilderness designation is that there's supposed to be no degradation of water quality in this area. You're not supposed to allow any pollution, which is one of the problems with mining is when you get permits, that's giving you an allowable level of pollution that's in your permit, even if you don't exceed it, which many do. But there's supposed to be no pollution here, and there is very little. So I want to also mention the Boundary Waters Wilderness is contiguous with Quetico Provincial Park in Canada. It's another 1 million acres, and Voyageurs National Park to the west in Minnesota. And so with the Superior National Forest, that's 4.3 million acres of this wild boreal forest and lakeland, connected waterways. There are more studies now showing how critical this piece of land in the region is for climate resiliency. We need these wild areas, especially the boreal forest, which is collects carbon, helps the world and helps all the species that need this. I guess I've heard it called like, these Noah's Ark areas that can maintain the kind of biodiversity that we need and help the planet. The boreal forest is, some people say it's even more important than the Amazon rainforest in terms of its, the work it does for keeping our climate healthy. And those other parks are, really important as well. Voyageurs National Park is really unique as well. You experience that mostly by water, which is different than a lot of national parks. In Minnesota, the Boundary Waters is probably more well known than our national park, Voyageurs, but that's a pretty cool place as well. I think a lot of people do houseboat trips along the huge lakes that are in Voyageurs National Park. What else? The Superior National Forest, which encompasses the Boundary Waters, has actually 20% of the fresh water in the U.S. National Forest system. So this is just a very water-rich area, and like I said, it's immaculate. The area is really important to our outdoor recreation economy in northeastern Minnesota, supports many, many jobs, and the only independent peer-reviewed economic study that's come out in the last few years showed how building this copper mine on the edge of the Boundary Waters would be worse for the economy in the long run in terms of jobs and income in the region because of the impacts that it would have and the strong economy that there is right now. Next slide. I also want to point out that the Anishinaabe people have lived in this area and continue to live in this area. They have since time immemorial. The Anishinaabe are also known in our region as Ojibwe or Chippewa, which you might have heard of. So, these folks have a deep relationship to the lands and water in the Boundary Waters in that region. They continue to harvest wild rice in the Boundary Waters region, as do non-native folks. And several of our Ojibwe bands in Minnesota maintain treaty rights to hunt, fish, and gather in the Boundary Waters in that region. These are sovereign nations. Tribes play a big role in protecting the Boundary Waters and have called for its protection. So, that's important to know and learn the history of as you learn the history of the Boundary Waters. And the tribes have been super important allies in advocating to our government to protect this place. Next slide, I also love to show our sort of national audiences outside of Minnesota, at least. Just the national context here, this is wilderness areas in the U.S. We don't have very many in the middle of the country. The two you see up there in Minnesota, right in the middle, the green is the Boundary Waters and the border of Canada. And then there's a purple wilderness area. It's different management. That's why it's purple. That's Isle Royale. It's in Lake Superior, part of Michigan, but it's actually really close to Minnesota. But the Boundary Waters is huge, and it's our Midwestern area. So one of the reasons it's such a valuable place is you can take people, you can drive in a van from Chicago and bring a group up and go into the Boundary Waters. It's more accessible than a lot of backcountry areas that require expertise or really expensive chartered flights and etc. to get in. But, school groups go from Minneapolis, from Chicago, from Des Moines, other areas in the Midwest. It's really important. And there aren't as many protected areas as there are out west, as you can see. The next slide shows you again the beauty of the Boundary Waters, but I'm going to get into the risks of mining. So this is an aerial view of Birch Lake, which is along the Cowichan River. That's a major water body that flows out of and then back into and through the heart of the Boundary Waters. Cowichan means the river full of beaver houses in Ojibwe. This is the proposed Twin Metals copper mine site that you're looking at. The wilderness boundary is roughly on the horizon here, and then the main mine site would be on the top right part of the photo. The water flows out of the picture to the left, and that is past many cabins, campsites, and resort and outfitting businesses before the water goes back into the wilderness boundary. So everything drains into the Boundary Waters from here. On the next slide, you'll see some examples, which you're probably familiar with, of the type of visible devastation mining of this type often can result in. The EPA is called copper nickel mining, America's most toxic industry. We don't think the most popular wilderness in the country is the right place to allow that type of operation. We've had peer review research show that even under normal operations, pollutions from a twin metal mine would move through surface and groundwater and into the boundary waters, and that's not to mention other like risks, failures, catastrophes. And then there are other impacts besides water quality, like the deforestation, air quality, light pollution, making the edge of the wilderness in that aerial photo an industrial mine site instead. The next I can go through pretty quickly, but if we need to refer back to a map, this just shows you a little bit more of the location proposed for twin metals mining, which is the main one concerned about in the boundary waters watershed, although there are other potential mine sites. But it's just on this unprotected southern edge of the boundary waters where the water flows into and through, and that's the maroon path of pollution is like direct water flow. One more map is this shows the waterways. You can see how water rich this area, a lot of wetlands, and that's the proposed mine site and tailings operation, which I won't go into a ton of detail about, but you can see how it's threatening directly some of those creeks and wetlands and just in a very water rich environment. They want to put this tailings stack right there as well, which on the next picture you can see would actually be visible from Birch Lake. You'd be up above the treetops there. You'd see the tailings management site. Those are, besides the mine site itself, the tailings pile are what are so problematic because you just can't contain this pulverized rock and the runoff or particulates that often result from that. I want to talk briefly about the campaign to save the boundary waters and then the comment period. So the campaign to save the boundary waters is led by Northeastern Minnesotans for Wilderness. So that's the organization I work for. We're based in Ely, and you come visit our headquarters when you're there. Sorry, my messages just dinged at me. Should turn those off. We were founded in 2012 by local families and businesses, got together literally in a kitchen table and wanted to launch a national effort. And that's what we are now, a 400 plus coalition of organizations and businesses and tribes and other groups and hunting and angling organizations united to permanently protect the boundary waters from copper mining. We reach collectively millions of people, and we have the attention of our national and state level decision makers and are really on the precipice of being able to make change. You can go to the next slide, Katya. One other we do a lot of creative things besides what you might consider to be the normal, really important, multi-prong approach of policy, science, outreach, education, legal battles. We've done adventure advocacy, and this is where Amy is the star, but we've done multiple, some might say crazy, adventures in the outdoors to raise awareness about the boundary waters and the need to protect it. And then just on the history, the Obama administration terminated the mining leases and proposed a 20-year ban on copper mining in the boundary waters watershed. Unfortunately, the Trump administration tried everything in its power to bring the twin metals, mine to the boundary waters and reverse those protections we had won and were underway. But we're back in a great place thanks to the defense we played and became a stronger coalition. Someone pointed this out, but the next slide shows you this article, which is a great recap of where we came from and like how we built this and how we modeled our campaign after other successful wilderness, public lands preservation campaigns in America, like Yellowstone, Rocky Mountain National Front, all of those. I think you can go 2 slides ahead, Katya. And then what is happening right now, and this is what the comment periods are going to be about. So our goal, like I said, has been permanent protection from the boundary waters, and then downstream voyagers and Quetico would be to ban sulfide or copper mining in the watershed of the wilderness. And there's multiple things that need to happen. One of them is at the federal level, a mineral withdrawal, which is a confusing term. It's otherwise known as a mining ban, but you take the minerals out of the mineral leasing program, so you can't develop mines there. And that can be done for 20 years on federal public lands. That is what is being proposed right now, and what the federal comment period you're going to write about today is regarding. So the Biden-Harris administration, the BLM, is considering this. The federal government also needs to, again, cancel and terminate once and for all those 2 federal mineral leases, and we hope they do that. Otherwise, we're going to win in court. And then we need to pass federal legislation to make this permanent. Representative Betty McCollum of St. Paul has her bill introduced to do just that, and we hope that will pass next year. We're hard at work on that. We need to also, at the state level, amend our what's called non-ferrous, which means non-iron, so like copper mining, our mine siting regulations to ban mining in the Boundary Waters watershed. That's what the other comment period is about tonight. And that is something that is underway because we filed a first ever of its kind lawsuit to challenge our inadequate laws to protect the boundary waters under the Minnesota Environmental Rights Act. So that's a very important opportunity. And then we have a complementary state legislation we'll eventually need to pass in Minnesota to ban copper mining on state lands in the area. But the crux of the Twin Metals project, at least, is federal land. So the 2 public comment periods, what we want to spend some time on tonight. Next slide. I don't want to go into so much detail to confuse you, but I want to make this clear, and if there are questions later, we can address those. So the U.S. government has proposed a 20-year ban, and they're accepting public comments on, what should they consider, what should they take into account. That deadline for the comment period is January 19th of next year. So you have a little bit more time there after the main holidays that are happening in December. But next week is a comment deadline for our state process, and we encourage everyone to submit your comment for that, even if you don't live in Minnesota. That's totally fine. You have a stake in this national wilderness area, and you can write to the Minnesota DNR. So that deadline is next week. Let's go to the next one. All right, so you've probably done this before, but you don't have to write a super long technical comment, or that's what organizations and scientists are doing, but citizens should weigh in. I think the most important thing to do is choose your own story. If you've been to the Boundary Waters, like many of you are saying in the comments, talk about your trip and the impact it had on you. What do you remember? Who else in your family or your circles has a Boundary Waters story, and what did it mean to them? If there's a topic that we've touched on or not tonight around, wildlife or the Northern Lights, or, PETA's business, Women's Wilderness Discovery that you use, talk about that and the importance of that. So I think add something personal or some topic that matters to you, and then make the ask, which on both of these comments is considering completely banning copper mining on the edge of the Boundary Waters on the public lands, or the state rules for where a mine of this type could be sited. The Broads have a great tip sheet that we can give you the link to that has even more tips, but these are the ones we really want to emphasize. You can visit our action page if you want to grab the template there, which I'll show you in a second. And then I included information here which will keep visible for you on how to submit these 2 different comments by using the designated email for the Federal Government Bureau of Land Management, or for using the portal that the Minnesota DNR has set up to prove you're not a bot and then send your comment. I know I'm going too long, but I think I'm almost done. Next slide. Katrina decided we also wanted to do something fun for you and encourage you to finish these up after tonight. If you, after you submit your comments, email me or Katya that you did it, and we'll trust that you did it. You can send your comment to us as well. We'd love to see it. And then we'll put you in a random drawing. I have a free pair of Keen, like a code for free Keen shoes to give away. That we'll make a drawing. So that'll be fun. And then, like someone said earlier, please share the word. We're trying, especially by next week and then again by January 19th, to just get tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of comments. So any way you can think of to share and ask people to take these actions with you, that'd be great. And then why don't you skip forward to Katya, and we can show the sample if we need to later. But just some other fun stuff going on. Our website has lots of info. You can listen to our podcast. And if you want to buy merch as gifts for people, you can get that directly from some fun t-shirts and stuff. An artist did this one for us. We have stickers. We also have like cleaning companies and other gear shops that support us and give us, 10% back or whatever. So you can check out our shop to support stuff. I know people like to do that kind of thing. And just lots of places if you do want to learn more particulars as you write your letter. And I think that's it.
All right. Thanks, Sam. That was great. I just put my email in the chat. And Sam, you might want to do that too. We would love to enter you in that drawing. And also please attach your comment. If you're inclined to share it, we would love to read it. Either put it in the body of the email or attach it as a document. All right, thanks, Sam. There's her email. And next, we're just going to shift over to Amy. Are you ready, Amy?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Great to see you tonight. I'm just here to be a cheerleader for the Boundary Waters, which is something my husband Dave and I have been doing for a number of years. So as Sam mentioned, the adventure advocacy, that is something he and I have taken on, but we're not doing it alone. There are so many other people doing amazing projects to help protect the Boundary Waters in their own particular way. So it's pretty fun to see. I'm going to start sharing my screen. If anything goes wrong with this, let me know in the chat, please. All right.
Looks good.
There we go. Okay, so first, just to give you a little taste of the Boundary Waters, I know folks have already done a great job of describing it, but just so you understand what we're talking about here, it's a place where many amazing animals live, like these lovely loons and moose, although the moose population isn't doing so well right now, but still the Boundary Waters is a place where you may be lucky enough to see one on a canoe trip. And of course, this is the main mode of travel. So in the summertime, paddling a canoe on the lakes, rivers, and streams. And then, of course, in order to get from one lake to another, sometimes you have to carry your canoe and all your stuff. So you portage, or if you're from Canada, you would say portage. So hiking on these trails between the lakes. So that's just to give you a sense of what it's like there. And then the involvement that and I have done, it's been a few different projects, and how we got involved was basically he and I are wilderness guides. Like we've guided people by canoe in the summertime and by dog sled in the wintertime in the wilderness area. And we also run a nonprofit organization that's educational in nature called the Wilderness Classroom. So we have this background of going on human-powered expeditions and sharing them with students. So using technology to connect to the internet and post pictures and share blog posts and really get the students from their classrooms participating in adventures. And so when we heard about the proposed copper mine upstream of our absolute favorite wilderness area, we were devastated, and we thought about how we could help out. And we actually went to Save the Boundary Waters Education and Action Center right in Ely, called Sustainable Ely, and people were signing a canoe as a petition to the federal government, and we thought that was cool. We signed the canoe ourselves, and it didn't take us long to think, the canoe was destined for Washington, D.C., but there wasn't a concrete plan for how to get it there. So we volunteered to paddle this canoe to Washington, D.C. So that's how we got involved in the first place in 2014. So we left Ely, paddled through the Boundary Waters, and made our way all the way to Washington, D.C. And that journey took us 100 days. We gave presentations along the way. So here we are as we were starting out, heading into the Boundary Waters. This is just downstream from the proposed mine site on the South Quishwe River. In this brief segment where it's outside of the wilderness area, but then of course we followed it back in to the wilderness as we went. And this is sort of fast forwarding, right? So Washington, D.C. 100 days later, and that was the start. During that journey, we were really impressed by how many people knew about the Boundary Waters. Even giving a presentation, far away, like New York City, all these different places, we would ask people to raise their hands if they had ever been to the Boundary Waters. And in every single presentation we gave, there was always at least someone in the audience who shared their experience in the wilderness. So we realized, it really has a national significance. And also we were motivated to keep going and do another project to help protect the wilderness area. And what we realized during LDC was that, yes, we're sharing the journey with people, but we were outside of the wilderness area for most of it. We were getting farther and farther from the place we wanted to protect. And so we decided to spend a year in the Boundary Waters. So in 2015 and 16, we did just that, of course, with major help from the campaign to save the Boundary Waters. So we were happy to write articles and share blog posts and social media content, lots of photos and video clips and stuff. Really trying to allow people to live vicariously through us while we were out there, just to put this wilderness area on people's minds throughout the course of a whole year. And straightforward than the other one, right? We one a whole year, so we went straight line. We kind of went all over the place, and the goal was to see as many lakes, rivers, and streams in the whole wilderness that we could. And so we visited 501 bodies of water. And the red flags on the map show spots where we were collecting data. So we gathered some baseline water quality information and gathered water samples looking for microplastics. That was for this cool group called Adventure Scientists. And then, yeah, with the water clarity, conductivity, some different things. All right, so we began a journey on the fall equinox, and that was a time when there were fewer and fewer people visiting the wilderness, and so we really learned to slow down and just enjoy our surroundings. And that really became more and more important to us throughout the journey. So many other expeditions we've been on, we were traveling from point A to point B, and we had to do it a certain amount of time. But in this case, it was about experiencing the place, and we had no real set, daily mileage that we had to achieve and stuff like that. So we took the time to observe the little things around us. And the days grew shorter and colder, and things began to freeze around us. And I always like to think about kind of where we were at. You know, every year I sort of look back and think about where we were during this time of year, and about, you know, we were experiencing the lakes freezing all around us. It was slow, slow year for the ice to form. It did eventually, and we were pretty happy when we could finally walk on the ice, and we traveled in a rather different way. And this just highlights one thing I wanted to share with you this evening, that the Boundary Waters, you know, it's a gorgeous, amazing place where you can experience a lot of type 1 fun as you're paddling your canoe and enjoying a sunset and listening to the loons. But there's also this other kind of fun called type 2 fun. Maybe you've heard of it. And that's when you're, you know, experiencing a real challenge, and it's maybe not that fun when you're going through the experience, but it makes a really good story afterwards. So I think this is one of the most memorable experiences of our lives, was figuring out how to travel on the lakes as they were freezing, but before the snow really came. And so we're towing our canoe, walking on ice with ice grippers on our boots, wearing these things that look kind of like spacesuits. Those are dry suits because we were sort of expecting to fall in if we hit thin ice, but we actually never did fall in. So just a little flavor of the type 2 fun to be had out there. And I think it's really important, especially for young people, to experience some of these challenges and figure out how to solve things. Maybe not quite as extreme as this, but you know what I mean. And as winter finally came on, we were able to really settle into a routine and enjoy the winter weather out there. We eventually had 3 sled dogs that helped us pull our load and settled into the routine of camp. So I'll just share with you briefly our record-setting like 5-second camp teardown. We really got the hang of things there. All right, so I'm gonna turn off my video in hopes of letting the pictures be better here. Sorry. All right, and there we are with the 3 sled dogs. So that was our winter time in the wilderness. And you know, after we ended the year, you know, we returned to canoeing and experienced a summer in the wilderness and then a fall, and we exited the wilderness and ended up writing a book about the journey. So some of you may have heard of it, A Year in the Wilderness, but we wanted to continue with the adventure advocacy. So the book was ready to go. Instead of just doing a book tour, like flying and driving all over the place, we ended up teaming up with Save the Boundary Waters again to give presentations and share the book on this journey called Pedal to DC. So that was a fun project where we rode bikes, towed a canoe, and did a rather unconventional book tour. So, all right, I think I'll pretty much wrap it up here. Just want to leave you with one last pretty image from the wilderness. This was on our last day as we were loading up during a year in the wilderness. And so we've since passed on the torch, and there have been some amazing other adventure advocacy projects since, and some great wilderness warriors. So I hope that you write your comments, and hope you enjoyed this little snippet of the Boundary Waters.
All right. Thanks so much, Amy. Wow. That's an incredible story. Great photos too. Such great adventuring there in a incredibly wild part of our country. And thanks everyone for tolerating me turning off your video so we could make sure to continue to hear Amy. but feel free to turn your video back on. I want to acknowledge that we are going a little over time here. For those of you who have to take off, we completely understand. I'm going to put some talking points and the tips that Sam mentioned in the whiteboard for you to view right now. You can take a screenshot of it. You can copy those. We will also be emailing those to you as well with the links for where to send your comments. So don't worry if you have to take off, we will get you that information. And we also just want to leave a little bit of time for anybody who wants to stay a little bit longer for questions and answers from any of our speakers this evening. So feel free to put your question in the chat if you like. And I'm going to ask Sam and Lauren to kind of monitor that while I do the whiteboard. So feel free to chime in if there's a question I'm missing. And I think there was a question up there earlier about Canadians, of course, the predictable Canadian question. And feel free to like unmute yourself too if you want to just go ahead and speak up. So I'm going to go ahead and get those talking points up on the whiteboard, and I'll let Sam and Lauren kind of manage the questions a little bit.
And just to reiterate that if you are brand new to advocacy letter writing and comments, that it really, again, it takes using a few bullet points that can be written for you and weaving those into your personal story. It's so powerful in our action work, and it's so easy to get good at doing. And so the worst thing that can happen is that you don't comment, and the best thing that can happen is that you give it your best. And so thank you so much for either being a weathered letter writer and commenter and advocate, and or trying this out for the first time. We'll make sure that everyone gets all these tips and tricks sent right to their email so that you're not on a time constraint. Except for the deadline of when the public comments are due.
Right. Don't forget that deadline.
And that deadline is, let's reiterate that deadline as well. And it is Sam, do you know the exact date?
The deadline for the state comments, which anyone can do, but it's the Minnesota DNR, is next Thursday, midnight. So that's December 9. And the federal comment to the Bureau of Land Management is January 19th, I believe, also at midnight.
Right. Thank you.
I mean, I answered these other couple questions in the chat, but I can also say something out loud about them. But if other people want to ask things out loud, I want to give this time to you. All right, I'll answer them then. The short answer on Canada is yes, that's important, and Canada has been involved. We work with Canadian groups and other leaders to, because it basically violates a treaty to not pollute each other's international waterways. The U.S. government under the Trump administration did a really poor job in responding to Canada over their official government concerns about this question. So it is important, but I will also say that the U.S. is where the twin metals will be stopped. Like Canada can't make the decision to prevent the twin metals mine or things on the southern area of the boundary waters. They can. It's an important sort of part of the puzzle that if Canada is pushing the U.S. government to please don't do this because it hurts our interests as well, but the decision needs to come from our government and Congress. There are also First Nation tribes in Canada who have been involved and live on the Canadian side of the border. So there's a much longer blog that answers this exact question because it is one we get pretty frequently. So I put the link and you should read that.
So as you're looking over these tips and tricks, something that I found really helpful when we trained for lobbying is practicing how to sit in a meeting and state your case. And so maybe we could walk through a quick template right now as you're writing these to share some fluidity. So for example, not having to use all the talking points is a-okay. You can use one or two of these. So including something personal, the Boundary Waters is the most popular wilderness area in the US. It's the largest here and here. I absolutely love these areas and visited it in 2015, where I had the opportunity to meet locals, canoe, kayak, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Being there helped me understand how pristine the waters are in North America. In fact, they're the cleanest, and there's a way that you can tie them in there. We are urging you today to please ban copper mining on the edge of the Boundary Waters. Thank you. That's how simple these can actually be. And they can be as complicated also as you want them to be. But it's just important to know that this letter writing and comment period is for everybody.
Someone asked about drilling. How far along are they? Yeah, the Twin Metals Mine project is not built. It's not. We're not, and our goal is that it never will be. Now, because they've had these 2 federal mineral leases actually for decades and they expired, that's one reason they shouldn't have them anymore. Is they're expired, or they were. Because they have those, even though they're under dispute, they are allowed to do some like exploratory drilling and preparatory work on those leases. So they have test drill sites. There's some other, light development like road widening or clearing. And that's also something that we try and keep an eye on because we can push back if we think they're doing too much sort of exploratory, but they are able to do some of that on these mining leases that they currently hold.
Sam, did you catch the comment that from Betsy that said, you said there was mining companies already started doing some drilling? How far along are they?
She just answered that.
Oh, you just did? Okay. I want to make sure that was what you said. Okay.
Another question that came up is, where's the link for the Department of Natural Resources? And it is in the white. If you are looking at the screen, it is right underneath it. It says, see comment link on right sidebar, but actually on our screen, it reads right underneath it. And so you can see that there. Great. And Amy posted the template for the Department of Natural Resources comment period. These templates are invaluable to the flow of your letter writing. So thank you so much for providing that resource. Feel free to use those and add your own personal stuff. Does anybody else have any questions that are coming in?
You're sending this document to us, right?
Yeah, we will send you these tips and talking points and the links for emailing, and yes, you got it, along with the deadlines.
Yes. And then what we'll ask you to do is save it as a bookmark on your screen, because as you all know, and I can't help myself as a grassroots organizer here, this work is never done, right? We're just getting started. The process is, we're in this for the long haul, right? And so we're submitting our comments now, whether it is this same exact issue or something else, we'll probably be involved again, submitting comments on something else. And so we really hope that you begin to practice this on a daily basis.
All right. If there are no further last minute questions, speak now. If you've got a burning question last minute.
I've got one question. This is
Go for
Kathy.
it.
Okay, it was to Sam. On her presentation, there was an article that was referenced from November 16th, 21, an article, but it went by so fast in the presentation, I didn't really see it. And I was just wondering if you could reference that so I could look it up.
Yeah, I think that's the Mountain Journal article. And I linked it in the chat just now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's great, and it's quite long because part of it is an interview with Becky Rom, our kind of founder and campaign chair. But the what's cool about it is it compares sort of our fight to other major battling extraction industries next to precious places in America. Compares that and sort of how we learned and helped from those advocates, how still today, advocates of these different projects work together, even though they focus on their separate things, but kind of what worked for you there and what strategy is best, because it's such a monumental undertaking to beat any mining project or any extraction industry, and they're not all, those fights are not all won. Probably most of them are lost, actually. We were certainly told back in 2012 that we would never stop twin metals, but we will.
You will.
Right.
Thank you.
Persistence. All right. Well, since we've gone over, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to, I'm just putting again Sam and my emails in the chat again. Please send us your comments. Let us know that you submitted your comments so we can add you to that drawing for some Keen shoes. And I just want to really quick thank our speakers who joined us today. Lauren, of course, our Associate Director at Broads, and Sam, Amy, and Mo and Jan for speaking with us tonight and sharing all that Broads are doing from our national office all the way to, our broadband chapter there in Minnesota. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all the knowledge you've shared. Thank you for all the work that you have put in over many years to protecting this amazing place. And we will, as Broads, continue to do this work with you. We are right by your side all the way. So cheering you along and fighting along with you. So thanks also to everybody who joined us from everywhere across the country. It was so great to see all your faces. I did take a screenshot and I'm excited to share that with our staff and everybody else. And yeah, submit your comments, send it to us. We want to see them. And hope you have a great evening. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.